Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, one rental at a time. Yes, for many people, it is a holiday of vacation, but at one rental at a time, our experts don't know what day it is. We just keep delivering value. And on Mondays, that starts with Mr. Greg Dickerson. How you doing, sir?
Doing great, Michael. Good to see you.
Nice to see you as well. So I remember, what was it, about a year ago, maybe 14 months ago, you actually got a chance to interview Grant Cardone. You and him run in some of the same circles, have some of the same friends. So that was a great interview. If people don't know what it is, I'll find the link and put it below, but go ahead.
Yeah. That all started with a discussion on, Grant wanted to get to $10 billion in assets under management. So I, collaborated with him and his team and put together a little business plan for them to get to 10 billion and what that looked like. And, what kind of capital they needed to be raising, what kind of deals that needed to be taken down, nothing he didn't know, but it was just, one of those discussions, hey, is this a reality? Because there was an interview that he did one time, or a video, and it's probably still out there, where he was talking about $1 billion transaction.
Yeah.
And it kind of stopped him in his tracks. He's like, well, wait a minute, how do I do $1 billion? I mean, how much do I need to raise? And so that's where the discussion was spurred from. It was like, well, you need to be able to take that down if you want to get to 10 billion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think he closed at the end of December, $978 million deal.
For the year?
No, there was one transaction. It was like 4, maybe 5 apartments in Fort Lauderdale or somewhere. Again, I don't know. I was following on social media, but it sounds like he may have done the deal. So pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a multi-property portfolio acquisition. I can't remember what the total dollar amount was, but yeah, it's the biggest deal of his career so far.
Very cool. It's fun to see, again, you interviewed him 12, 14 months ago, whatever it was, to see that now come out. So it's amazing having you be a part of this channel. So I appreciate you. For that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I wanted to ask you about is, so he just bought this nice new pad in Florida. And as you may recall, he left California kind of like with the big middle finger, like, I'm never coming back. Taxes are too high, blah, blah, blah. Well, it turns out he really likes the weather, and he just dropped $40 million on a beach house in Malibu, California. Did you hear about this?
No, I didn't know about that, and I know he relocated his business. So I think he left California from a business and, headquarters standpoint, but he still goes back to the West Coast a lot and rents and things like that. So I think he's been hunting for a while, waiting for the right property to show up after he sold his house, which, is what he took the profits from and reinvested in multifamily. And that kind of helped him grow and scale there. Selling his house that he had, I think it was in Malibu, I think it was in Malibu. The first one he sold made 40 million on or something, or it was $40 million house.
Yeah, he made 8 figures. I remember that. I don't remember if it was 20 or 30 or whatever.
Yeah, it was a $40 million house, but he made I think he made like 8 or 10 million off of it. And
exactly.
Ended up, and he had in that video we were talking about, he did the other day, we'll get into, with Robert Kiyosaki. I can't remember if it was in that video or he was talking to somebody else. The guy that he sold that house to, keeps giving him a hard time, saying, man, you sold it too cheap. It's worth twice as much now. And Grant's like, dude, I took that money that I made on that, and I've got $4 billion worth of real estate now.
Exactly. I won. Yeah. What I wanted to talk about here is, I've actually found an article from the Wall Street Journal that has a bunch of pictures. So I think it's fun to look at what $40 million will buy you. But really want to talk about the whole idea.
Not much in Malibu. That's like a little shanty.
Well, we'll see in a minute, because it's pretty nice. Yeah. But the whole idea was, I wanted to really have that conversation about, he's pretty big in don't buy your house, don't buy a home, rent, build your stake. And now he's out buying a home. We actually covered that in the Wall Street Journal article. But I think it's an important conversation. You brought up a video I haven't seen yet against Grant and Robert Kiyosaki, basically, where Robert was like tense with him. Why don't you talk about that before we look at what $40 million will buy you?
Yeah, they brought Grant Cardone on their channel, 4 weeks ago. So if you go look at the Rich Dad YouTube channel, you'll see the interview, about 3 or 4 weeks ago with Grant, Robert Kiyosaki and Kim Kiyosaki. And they were just talking about real estate, how you get started, and, what advice Grant has for people getting started. And Grant's like, go buy a deal like I just bought, this $270 million deal behind me, start out with 250 units and things like that. And Robert Kiyosaki got a little annoyed with him and said that he was disrespecting his audience because they're trying to help people get started. He said, people can't start at your level. They can't start with 250. And Grant's argument was, sure you can. If you partner with people like me or other people, you can start out at 250. Now, here's the thing. So, Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad Poor Dad was the catalyst that launched my investment business, entrepreneurial investment career. Without reading that book, I don't know that I would have done what I was able to do, especially as fast. And again, I wanted to be Rich Dad, build businesses to invest, to create cash flow, to invest in other assets, grow and scale from there. What's interesting is, Robert Kiyosaki still doesn't have the rich dad mentality, because he and Kim talked the whole time, and one of the conversations they had was, well, how do you even manage a property, once you grow and scale? And Kim's philosophy and Robert's philosophy is, if you don't do it yourself, if you don't self-manage yourself, you can't learn the business. The only way to grow, the only way to really, be successful is you have to actually do it yourself to learn, the ropes. And what's interesting, what Grant talked about a little bit was, obviously third-party property management. When you buy a bigger asset, the management's built in, it's already there. And, they disagreed on that front. And, I'm going to have to say that I think, Robert and Kim are very old school from the standpoint of what they teach and the philosophies of how to get started. And it's great for some people, because there's a lot of people that want to be hands-on. They want to do everything themselves. But if you want to grow and scale, and if you want to do bigger assets, you absolutely do not want to manage yourself. And that, what they are saying and teaching is actually wrong. And it's actually old school, and even now, they're partnered with Ken McElroy, and they're doing, bigger deals and stuff. And, Ken, he may have his own property management division, but it's a separate, kind of entity, kind of a company thing. But to tell people that you have to absolutely manage property yourself so you can learn and understand this, that, and the other, and that's just wrong. What you want to do is you want to manage the asset, you want to manage the managers, you want to leverage if you want to grow and scale. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with starting out small and, managing your own properties and do it if that's what you want to do. But if you want to grow and you want to scale, you've got to leverage the talent and expertise of others, and you learn from them. So you can absolutely learn the business by managing a manager. You don't have to do it yourself to know it. So that was an interesting conversation they had. Yeah,
I'm going to go find that. Probably put it on while I go for a run or something, because I missed that entirely. Would it be? It really does. They strike me. It strikes me as probably it had to be a tense conversation, just knowing where both parties come from, right? And both their talk tracks. So you're right. One is more, hey, we're focused on mom and pop, and this one is focused on being a money magnet and, doing bigger things. So that's going to be an interesting conversation.
Well, and, Robert Kiyosaki's made more money on his business, his educational business, than he has investing in property. So he's not really a sophisticated real estate investor or developer by any means.
Yeah.
They've done well, but they're very limited in their understanding and their expertise. Grant's on a whole different level. And, Robert's point was, hey, this is my audience. I want you to educate my audience.
That's fair.
To how they can get started. And Grant's like, look, man, this is how I started. This is what I did. I started with, 12 units, 30 units, or whatever it was, 30 unit building. And then, I grew and scaled from there. And I'm just telling you, and I would agree. And this is what I tell a lot of people, he could have skipped all of that early stuff and just started big, because there is capital out there. If you know how to, understand, the opportunities, where to find the properties, how to raise the capital, how to bring other people to the table to get these bigger deals done. You need somebody that can, guarantee the loan. You need, the capital to take it down, the down payment. But at the end of the day, bigger loans are easier to do because the banks want to put their money in those types of assets. And, they'll do all of the underwriting and the evaluation for you to make sure that the deal works. So it's just a different game. And same thing here, if I would have known now what I know now back when I got started, I could have easily, done 10 times more than what I did. I just didn't know. And neither did Grant when he started. Now he's realizing it, going, man, he's finally starting to do the bigger deals now,
Yeah. It's so interesting because, again, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, we've talked about this, I don't know, a dozen times. You read it, want to be Rich Dad. I still sit here, having spoken to you for probably 2.5 years. I still am Robert and Kim, right? I still have that mindset. I still have that go take my thing, manage my thing. And it's fun. And
that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. The thing that really struck me was, Robert wasn't being fair to, Grant in terms of the business model. Grant was just talking about what he did and how it works.
Yeah.
And that, yes, you can absolutely start big. Yeah. And then, Robert was right as well. There's nothing, there's nothing wrong with starting small, duplexes, sixplexes. Yeah. I think that's what they teach, because there's a lot of people out there that there's just no way they can start at 250 units. They just can't.
Right.
So, but what they can do is a house or a duplex or quad or, something like that. And that's great as well. But it was really funny. Yeah. He just jumped right in and said, Grant, you're disrespecting my audience. They can't do what you're doing.
That's amazing. Well, hey, I want to show you this because I just thought it was fun giving you and Grant running the same circles. I found this picture, and this is what 40 million buys you in, I guess, on Carbon Beach.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a 9,000 square foot pad. It looks, it's even got grass on the side, which I'm sure is not pretty hard to grow. And I guess it's elevated.
Yeah. And I was just kidding, by the way, about a $40 million shanty. If you have 10 to 40 million in Malibu, you can do pretty good.
Yeah, you can do pretty good. Absolutely. So I guess what else? So again, some pictures here. What I wanted to talk about is he first saw this, I guess, after he was decompressing from Undercover Billionaire. I guess the show put him in on Malibu Beach to like decompress after filming that 90 days. Have you ever seen Undercover Billionaire?
Yes, I have. I've seen, I haven't watched all of his episode, but I saw the first initial one, and yeah, it's a neat show. It's very interesting.
Yeah. What I wanted to do is get down to the bottom here.
Now he didn't like, so he talked about that too, not with Robert Kiyosaki, but with somebody else, another interview he did where he talked about, he was hesitant because of the title. Because he's not a billionaire, and he wasn't, at the time when he did the show, and it's Undercover Billionaire, and they're like, don't worry about it. It's good anyways. And, even now with the assets under management, and all his company stuff, he still is not, he still does not have a net worth over $1 billion.
Yeah. So here's back to the real estate. What does he own? Here we go. So he sold his LA home for 18 million. He left because of California's tax policy, obviously. He actually owned Lionel Richie's house. That was, I didn't know that. And he just dropped 28 million on a Miami home. That's the, what is it? Hilfiger? Yeah. Tommy Hilfiger's pad. But I want to get down to where he says he's going to get some heat from his, he's right here. He says, I'm going to get bashed. But hey, can I come out and stay for the weekend? This is basically, he's been preaching, don't buy a home, don't buy a home. Right here, it says, one of the downsides of his Malibu purchase, he said, is that some of his social media followers might accuse him of hypocrisy since he frequently advises, don't buy a home. It's always a wise investment. It isn't always a wise investment. This is different because he got a good deal, right? This house was listed at 65. He bought it for 40. He thinks he's going to make 20 million. But let's be clear. When you got enough cash like this, you can go buy whatever the hell you want. This is not Grant's advice of don't buy a home, rent. It's kind of funny if people are going to pick on him for buying.
Yeah. Flipping the multi-million dollar houses. So, that's all well and good while, times are good. But, the problem is with what's getting ready to come down the pike with the Fed policy that's going to have to change, those high-end real estate markets change fast, and you can't give those houses away, much less, make any money on them, which was kind of his problem, back the first time. I'm
glad you brought this
with
up.
that first house. But anyways, what's interesting is he talked about that. There's another interview I saw with him and somebody else where he was talking about those scenarios and his whole philosophy of rent where you live, don't buy a house. And, he qualified it with that when you're getting started, like when you're young, you're getting started, rent where you live, take all the money you have and invest it in other assets versus buying a house, sinking that down payment into it and all that, because generally that's not a winning equation in the short term, less than 5 to 7 years. Generally, the rule has always been if you're going to stay somewhere more than 5 or 7 years, you're better off buying, but as we know, real estate moves in cycles. So that's not always right. If you'd have bought the peak of 2009 or 10, it took you 11 years before you got back to even.
Absolutely.
So your equity was gone, in negative for a long time. If you bought 4 years ago, 3 years ago, I mean, you've gained 30, 40%, potentially, maybe even double in some markets.
Yeah. Some markets have doubled. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And we know as soon as interest rates go up and, Fed policy changes, liquidity dries up, the market's going to go the other way. And so it's all cyclical, but at the end of the day, that's what he was basically talking about. And, for some people, renting makes a lot more sense than buying and owning. For other people, buying and owning makes more sense. At the end of the day, you have to live somewhere. And you and I talked about it. My mom just exited her house that, they've owned a house for, 60 years. And that became, at this stage in her life, that's her little nest egg. She paid the house off. She was able to exit it at the peak of the market. She put a nice little chunk of cash in the bank because they had a lot of equity in it. And for her, it was a great savings plan. Yeah. Now, if you go back and do the math of what they put down, what they spent on it, taxes, insurance, maintenance, all of that, and then subtracted a rent delta that they would have paid in rent, and taken that extra money and reinvested it, they would have done better by renting, but it was a forced savings plan. So, it worked out really well. And her parents before them, same thing. They owned the house, they owned it outright, ended up, selling it for 10x what they bought it for, but those deltas are getting less and less as time goes on.
Yeah.
Like her parents bought their house for, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 and sold it for, 200, something like that after 60 or 70 years. Well, my parents had owned houses for 60 or 70 years and wasn't quite that good.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the Fed in the next episode, because there's definitely some questions that I want to ask you about that. But when we close out this grant conversation, I think there's a couple of things, trying to tie it back to my audience. One of the things that I'm now starting to appreciate that I never even knew was a thing was house hacking. I've on my channel, I have a couple of experts who house hack, like literally roommates, right? They're in their 20s and they actually have roommates. They can live for free. Other experts I have on the channel house hack fourplexes and duplexes. These are ways you can kind of split the difference, right? You go get owner occupied loans, which are cheap. You don't have 15, 20% down. You got 3.5% down first time buyer. And then you have tenants or roommates, depending on how you want to look at it, that help sort of carry the mortgage. So I think there's a way you split the middle if that's where you are in your life. So
yeah, house hacking can be done with mixed use where you have commercial and multifamily. Maybe it's residential above, commercial below.
Yeah.
You can still, house hack that. There's VA loans that you can house hack, multifamily properties with, as long as it's under 5 units. From a commercial standpoint, you can commercial hack where you build a strip center and your business is in one of them and you rent the rest of them out, all those types of things. But yeah, hacking has been around for a long time. It's just one of those little buzzwords,
new terms
that's come around recently. And now with Airbnb, in the ADUs like you're doing, when you have your main house and you rent something out in the backyard, or I've done it with, I had a horse farm and, we had a barn with an apartment above it. And, when there wasn't like a groom or somebody staying in it, we'd rent it out, so you can house hack a horse farm. I mean, you can house hack all kinds of things.
Yeah. It's great stuff. I appreciate this conversation. How can people find you?
Yeah. GregDickerson.com. That's where all my info is. YouTube podcast. Go check it out.
Very cool. Thank you very much, bud.